The bobcat stood in the middle of the trail, staring at Claire. Its golden eyes were locked onto hers, unblinking. It didn't move, didn't run, just watched her, as if it had been waiting. Then, without warning, it turned and slipped into the trees, pausing only to glance back. It wanted her to follow. Claire's breath came fast. This wasn't normal behavior. Wild animals didn't seek people out, and they certainly didn't lead them anywhere. Her instinct screamed for her to turn around, to walk the other way. And yet, she hesitated. The trail stretched ahead, disappearing into thick trees. The bobcat was barely visible now, its spotted coat blending with the shadows. But then she saw it. Another movement, lower to the ground. Something else was down there, slowly drawing closer. That morning, Claire had woken up to another day of exhaustion. Sleep had been fitful, filled with restless dreams. The weight of life pressed heavy on her shoulders. She rolled out of bed, forcing herself through her usual motions. Coffee, a shower, a moment staring at her phone, dreading the emails waiting for her. Work had been relentless lately. Long hours, endless demands. No recognition, no relief. She barely had time for herself. Friends had stopped calling, assuming she was too busy. Maybe they were right. Lately, even small things felt overwhelming. The sound of traffic, the glare of a computer screen. She had to get away. The forest had always been her escape. No deadlines, no expectations. Just silence. She had grabbed her hiking boots, her water bottle, and her keys. No plan, just an urge to be somewhere else. Somewhere where she could breathe. The drive was long, but peaceful. The further she got from the city, the lighter she felt. Maybe this would help. She parked at the trailhead, stretching her legs. The air was cool, crisp, the kind of air that made you feel awake. She started walking, the crunch of leaves beneath her boots grounding her. The trees swayed gently above, indifferent to her presence. It was exactly what she needed. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could think, or maybe not think at all, just exist. Half an hour in, she stopped for water. The sound of birds was distant, comforting. Everything felt normal. Then, a flicker of movement in the trees. She caught it out of the corner of her eye. Just for a second. She turned, scanning the brush. Nothing. Probably just a squirrel, she thought. She kept walking, but a few minutes later, she felt it again. The sense of being watched, a presence just beyond her line of sight. Her pace slowed. Her pulse quickened. Something was out there. Claire had spent enough time outdoors to know when an animal was nearby. The feeling was unmistakable. But this wasn't just an animal passing through. She gripped the strap of her backpack, trying to shake the feeling. It was probably nothing, just her imagination. Or was it? The bushes to Claire's right exploded with movement. She barely had time to react before the bobcat shot out, moving fast, straight toward her. Instinct kicked in. She stumbled back, heart hammering, her mind screaming danger. It stopped just short of her, its muscles tense. Claire didn't move, afraid that one wrong step would set it off. But instead of attacking, the bobcat flicked its ears and took a slow step back, its sharp gaze locked onto hers. Seconds stretched. The bobcat made a low sound, not quite a growl, but not friendly either. Then, as if making a decision, it turned away and took a few steps toward the trees, pausing, looking back at her. It wanted her to follow. She hesitated. Every part of her knew this was crazy. Wild animals didn't ask for help, but something about the way it moved, the way it kept checking for her, made her believe it had a reason. The bobcat moved ahead, slipping between the trees with ease. Claire followed, her steps hesitant, each one a decision. Every instinct told her to turn back, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to see this through. Her breathing was shallow, her heart drumming in her chest. The trail was gone now, lost behind thick underbrush. If she turned back, could she even find her way? The bobcat glanced over its shoulder as if making sure she was still there. It wasn't running, wasn't trying to lose her. It wanted her to keep going. Claire swallowed. This was reckless. But something about the animal's behavior told her this wasn't just curiosity. There was a purpose to it. The deeper she went, the quieter everything seemed. No wind, no birds, just the soft crunch of her footsteps and the occasional rustle of the bobcat ahead. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't meant to stray this far. The familiar safety of the main trail was long gone. She glanced back, trying to see where she had come from. Nothing but trees. The trail had vanished behind her. A flicker of doubt gnawed at her. She was alone in an unfamiliar forest, following a predator. What was she thinking? She considered turning back, but which way was back? She had followed the bobcat in twists and turns, stepping over logs, pushing past thick bushes. Everything looked the same now. Her throat tightened. This was how people got lost. One wrong decision, one moment of carelessness, and suddenly the forest became a maze. But the bobcat was still there, waiting, its body low, its ears flicking forward. It wasn't stalking her. It was leading her. Claire clenched her fists, exhaling slowly. She wasn't lost. Not yet. If she could keep track of her surroundings. Her way back later. She pressed on, moving quicker now. The bobcat led her down a small slope, the ground uneven beneath her feet. She nearly stumbled but caught herself on a low branch. How far had they gone? Minutes felt like hours. The more she walked, the more she doubted she could retrace her steps. Fear prickled at the edges of her mind. If something happened, no one knew where she was. She hadn't told anyone about this hike. She shook the thought away. Focus, one step at a time. The bobcat stopped abruptly. Its ears twitched, nose lifting slightly. Then, without hesitation, it leapt forward, disappearing through thick brush. Claire hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. Was this it? Had she followed it for nothing? Then she heard it. A faint sound ahead, barely audible. Something struggling. She took a step forward, then another. Whatever was waiting beyond those trees, it was the reason she had been led here. Claire pushed through the last of the thick underbrush and gasped. A second bobcat, a much smaller one, was caught in a hunter's snare. Its back leg was trapped in the tight wire, its body twisted in distress. The mother bobcat circled anxiously nearby, ears flattened, tail twitching. She had been led here for this. Claire's mind raced. She had no tools, no way to cut the wire, but she couldn't just leave it. She glanced back. She had no idea where the main trail was anymore. Time was running out. The kitten let out a weak, pained cry. The mother bobcat paced restlessly, clearly agitated but unwilling to leave. Claire knew she had to act fast. She dropped to her knees beside the trapped animal, careful not to make any sudden moves. The wire was tight, cutting into its fur. She reached out, but the kitten flinched. "It's okay," she murmured, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince, the bobcat or herself. She needed something to loosen the wire, anything. Her fingers clawed at the dirt, searching for a sharp rock. The mother bobcat growled low, stepping closer. Claire's heart pounded, but she held her ground. "I'm trying to help," she whispered. Finally, her fingers brushed against something rough. A jagged stone, small but sharp enough. She grabbed it and wedged it under the wire, prying carefully. The kitten trembled but stayed still. The wire resisted at first, biting deeper into the fur. Claire gritted her teeth, putting more pressure. Then with a snap, the wire loosened. The kitten let out a tiny yelp and jerked free, stumbling onto shaky legs. Claire barely had time to react before the mother bobcat sprang forward. Instinct screamed at her to move, but she froze. The mother didn't attack. Instead, it sniffed the kitten, nudging it gently. The tension in Claire's chest finally eased. The kitten took a few wobbly steps before stumbling into the underbrush. The mother bobcat followed, its piercing eyes lingering on Claire for a moment, before disappearing into the forest. Claire sat back, breathing hard. She had done it. But now she had another problem. She was alone, lost in the deep woods with no clear way back. Her pulse quickened. The sun had shifted, casting long shadows. If she didn't find the trail soon, she'd be in real trouble. She rose, scanning the trees. Everything looked the same. She took a few steps before stopping. The snare. It hadn't been random. Someone had set it, and they might still be nearby. Her stomach twisted. Hunters, poachers. Either was dangerous. The thought of encountering them while lost made her skin crawl. The forest, once a place of escape, now felt like a trap. She needed to move, fast. But a chilling realization struck her. Whoever set the snare would be coming back, and they wouldn't be happy. Claire forced herself forward, keeping her steps light. Every crunch of leaves felt deafening. Then, voices, distant, sharp. Her breath caught. She dropped low behind a tree, heart hammering. The voices grew louder. Two figures moved through the trees, their shadows shifting. One had a rifle slung over his back. Armed poachers. She crept through the brush, keeping low. Then snap, a twig beneath her boot. The voices stopped. "Did you hear that?" Claire froze. A pause, then boots crunching toward her. She had seconds to decide, run or stay hidden. She edged back, but a branch snagged her sleeve. A shout cut through the air. "There! I saw something!" Adrenaline surged. She bolted. Branches tore at her as she sprinted, lungs burning. The voices behind her shouted, feet pounding. They were chasing her. Then, light. An opening. The trail. She burst through the underbrush just as a figure stepped into view. A uniform. A badge. A park ranger. Claire gasped as the men crashed through the trees behind her. The ranger raised a hand. "Stop!" Another ranger appeared, rifle raised. "Hands where we can see them!" The poachers hesitated, then raised their hands. Claire stumbled forward, breathless, knees buckling. She was safe. The second ranger moved in, securing the men. Claire sat back, trembling. It was over. The forest stretched behind her, vast and endless, but she had made it out. She exhaled shakily, looking up at the ranger. "There's something you need to see," she said hoarsely. "The bobcat snare. The proof. The reason she had nearly lost herself in the woods." The ranger nodded. "Let's get you home, miss." As they led her away, Claire glanced one last time at the trees. Somewhere in there, a bobcat had led her to this moment. A wild creature that had trusted her, and in the end, it had saved her life.